Come to order. The lawyers say I've got to read something for every hearing. It has to do with the hybrid hearings that we're doing. We have about an hour and 15 minutes, unless votes are moving faster than we would anticipate, all of which means I would love not to have to read this. Are there any lawyers here that? Okay. Can I deem it read?
I think you have to.
Oh, God. Okay. I'm going to do this as quick as I can. First, some administrative and technical notes. Members are reminded they must be visible on screen within the software platform for the purposes of identity verification. Members must continue to use the software platform's video function while attending the hearing unless they experience connectivity issues or otherwise technical problems that render the member unable to fully participate on the camera. If you're experienced technical difficulties, good luck. Please contact the committee staff. Maybe you'll get help. When you are recognized, the video will be broadcast via television's internet feeds. You will be recognized as normal for questions, but if you want to speak at any other time, you must seek recognition verbally. Please mute your microphone when you are not speaking, and remember to unmute prior to speaking. And please, lawyers, let's get rid of this wasted time. Please be aware that there's a slight lag between when you start speaking and when the camera switches to you. Please remember to keep the software platform video function on for the entirety of time you're attending the hearing. If you leave for a short period of other reasons of joining a different proceeding, I will remember that when it comes time for your turn. Please leave your video function on. If you would leave to join a different proceeding or will be absent for a significant period of time, you should exit the software platform entirely, then rejoin it when you return. Be advised that I've designated a committee staff member to mute unrecognized members' microphones. If necessary, please use the platform chat feature to communicate with staff regarding the technical and logistical support issues. Finally, you will see a 5-minute video, a countdown clock on the software platform's display, but if necessary, I will remind you. Now, we're going to begin this in 1, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Good afternoon. Committee will come to order. I'm going to dispense with the opening statement. Without objection, we'll put it in the record. I will simply make a few comments. The F-35 has been before this committee and other committees too many times. It's a 20-year program, and we still don't have it right, particularly on the maintenance of the platform. I am told that the current numbers are about 85% of the total cost of this system is in sustainment. At least about 15% of the total cost to buy it, and then we've got to repair it. Obviously, it's over a long period of time. We've got to get this right. It's not right yet. The sustainment of this platform is not where it needs to be. With that, I'll yield to my ranking member, Mr. Waltz.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I too, without objection, will submit my opening statement into the record so that we can have a more fulsome discussion given votes. I'll just add to, I think we had on our call yesterday, and just add to the chairman's comments that the concerns here are bipartisan and the concerns here are longstanding. And so what I'm interested in is how do we get to right and not be having these same types of hearings next year and the year after and the year after with all new faces, same issues. If you buy into the intelligence, at least I do, I think it's largely accurate from the briefings I've received from Secretary Kendall, the overmatch briefing, and others, that the Chinese Communist Party will believe they have overmatch within the next 5 to 7 years, then the clock is ticking to get this right. And we don't want to be in a situation where, maybe perhaps members of Congress felt back in the 1930s and they see what could be coming. I hope it's deterred, but what could be coming, and we have a system that's 25 years in the making and still not sustained and ready. And I'll just close with saying I think we all have a teachable moment right now in Ukraine in watching the Russian army, what readiness can mean to the performance of a military. And I don't ever want to put our soldiers, sailors, airmen, Marine Guardians in that position. So I really look forward, as the chairman said on the call, to getting to real solutions that we can support you to get there, so that we have a fully operable, 68% in terms of the A variant, at least from what I'm seeing. I believe that's the number GAO is reporting, is just unacceptable. I mean, it's just unacceptable to the taxpayer and to our military members. And with that, I yield.
Thank you, Mr. Waltz. Let's now turn to the witnesses. I welcome all of you. We have Stephen Morani, Acting Assistant Secretary of Defense for Sustainment. We have Lieutenant General Eric Frick, Program Executive Officer, the F-35 Joint Program Office. And we have Ms. Diana Maurer, Director, Defense Capabilities and Management at GAO. Let's start with Mr. Morani, if you would.
Thank you, Chairman Garamendi. Ranking Member Waltz and distinguished members of the subcommittee, thank you for the opportunity to update you on the department's progress on improving F-35 fleet readiness and affordability. I'm pleased to be joined with Lieutenant General Fick and Ms. Diana Maurer to discuss the state of the F-35 program. With more than 770 aircraft fielded across the enterprise, our U.S. and coalition warfighters are operating true cutting-edge combat capability, strengthening our alliances and building fifth-generation warfighter readiness. I'm proud of the many accomplishments achieved by our enterprise team of professionals to provide this critical warfighting capability to our joint force and international partners. That said, we recognize these capabilities are only useful if they are actually available to our warfighter, and the department continues to prioritize improving F-35 readiness rates with a particular focus on improving air vehicle and propulsion reliability and maintainability in collaboration with our industry partners. This month, the department delivered a report to Congress on F-35 sustainment affordability in response to Section 165B of the FY20 NDAA. The report states that the department reduced fleet-wide sustainment costs per tail per year by 22% between 2014 and 2020, and has made notable progress during the past year on managing sustainment costs and improving affordability as a result of the F-35 Joint Program Office's negotiation of the FY21 through 23 annualized air vehicle sustainment contract. While this is noteworthy progress, we fully understand that we still have work to do as we plan to support critical depot activations, address unscheduled and scheduled engine overhauls, and align spares requirements with our procurement schedules. Section 165B report also explains that the F-35 affordability is a component of broader tactical aviation sustainment affordability challenges. The services are enduring the added cost pressure of operating and sustaining newer weapon systems while simultaneously maintaining aging legacy fleets. As such, the department requires congressional support for divestiture of aging weapon systems consistent with the President's FY23 budget request. The F-35 program sustainment challenges must also be understood in the context of the department's programmatic and statutory responsibilities to sustain its current and future aviation portfolio with a capable, modernized, and resilient organic industrial base. In my testimony before this committee in October of last year, I mentioned that the OIB is the nation's readiness and war-sustaining insurance policy. Maintaining proper balance between organic and contractor sustainment will be a continuing challenge. This problem will only be exacerbated as legacy systems, which are largely sustained organically, are divested. As such, the health of the OIB and the working capital funds that support it depends upon optimizing organic capacity to support the department's newer weapon systems. Access to required technical data is key enabler of any effort to increase the organic role in F-35 sustainment. The department remains committed to obtaining the provisioning and cataloging technical data needed to transition to organic sustainment or supply chain management. With regards to F-35 provisioning of fiscal year 2020 NDAA, the department acknowledges congressional intent and will actively support compliance with those provisions. The sustainment challenges facing the F-35 are reflections of similar issues affecting the department's overall sustainment enterprise, which requires both government and industry teamwork to deliver effective warfighting readiness at an affordable cost. Ensuring accountability will be key, and I appreciate the opportunity to have these meaningful discussions with this committee as we aggressively address F-35 sustainment requirements and the capabilities of the defense sustainment enterprise. Thank you very much for your time, and I look forward to answering your questions.
Mr. Morani, thank you very much. We now turn to General Fick. You're responsible for this program, so tell us how you are improving it.
Yes, sir. Chairman Garamendi, Ranking Member Waltz, and distinguished members of the subcommittee, thank you for this opportunity to provide you with an update on the F-35 program. As I briefed you last April, our mandate remains the delivery of a capable, affordable, and available F-35 air system, outpacing the competitors to win tomorrow's fight as we develop, deliver, and sustain this fifth-generation capability at high-end fourth-generation costs. To that end, here's a quick update on the big hitters from a readiness perspective. Organic depot stand-up remains critical to long-term affordability and availability. In March, the Ogden Air Logistics Complex declared repair capability for the Gun System Control Unit. This marks the 39th workload established across 6 organic U.S. depots. For activated workloads, our organic depots today produce 73% of the component repairs in the ecosystem. We will activate 13 additional workloads this year, 4 of which were pulled forward from 2023. While this progress greatly enhances capacity, we're also building velocity, with 20 of those activated workloads already beating our targeted 30-day repair turnaround time. As you know, this velocity is critical to minimizing the requirement to buy extensive spares. We've also made significant progress against our most critical sustainment degrader across 2020 and 2021, the F-135 power module availability. This progress is due to increased production at the Air Force Sustainment Center's Heavy Maintenance Center at Tinker Air Force Base, increasing the capacity of the global power module repair network, and maturing our inspection procedures and damage tolerance limits to keep aircraft on wing longer. Engines on wing longer. We made real progress in all 3 of these areas, but Tinker really crushed the F-135 power module production plan for 2021, reducing turnaround time from 240 days to 122 and delivering 51 power modules against a target of 40. Tinker's on track to deliver over 60 power modules this year, and FRC Southeast is on track for initial depot capability in 2024. Our collective repair network, including our international facilities, will deliver 122 power modules in 22 compared to 76 last year, enabling us to accelerate our power module recovery by years. As nations increasingly rely on the F-35 to reinforce regional security, we must also be ready to surge sustainment support. Our global pooling business rules feature a mechanism for allocation and prioritization of our limited resources. This system differentiates between competing needs and ensures responsiveness to customer requirements in peacetime and in wartime. That sustainment surge is not limited to parts and material, as we are actively deploying support personnel in response to increased demand signals today. Historically, the program has endured initial spares shortages due to under-executed appropriated funds and shortages in participant funding. Reversing this trend, between FY15 and FY21, the program invested $4.8 billion in initial spares. For the past 3 years, the program met appropriated execution targets of 93%, and our on-time delivery rate is currently 92%. Beyond those initial spares, we're also maturing our afloat spares packages, our deployable spares packages, with lessons learned from recent CONUS and OCONUS deployments aboard Navy, Marine Corps, and Royal Navy cruises. I appreciate the committee's continued attention to F-35 data rights. This attention has served to leverage industry accountability and fairness while facilitating organic capability. While we have struggled to secure the funding required to procure the provisioning and cataloging data we require to establish an organic supply chain function, we are working another initiative designed to deliver those data through pilot programs with the component OEMs at low to no cost. Finally, we continue to make strides in driving down our sustainment costs. Mr. Marani already mentioned that our 21 through 23 annualized air vehicle sustainment contract represents the first multiple-year sustainment contract for our program, and it's a quantum leap forward in securing affordable life cycle costs for this program. It drives performance through an incentive structure that's focused on year-over-year improvements in full mission capability rate and select supply metrics. Under this contract, our cost per flight hour is projected to be reduced from our estimates by 8% in 2023. Additionally, the Pathfinder initiative I just mentioned has us looking at methodologies and opportunities to contract directly with original equipment manufacturers rather than our prime contractor. Ultimately, this move will unlock the door to future competition, which unlocks the door to cost reduction and performance improvement. These topics are front and center in my mind every day as I lead this organization. We have made significant progress, but I, like you, am not yet satisfied. The air system we are delivering today is unmatched capability-wise, and it is becoming increasingly affordable and available. With your continued support and your continued oversight, I am confident the F-35 will remain the premier fifth-generation air system for the U.S. and her allies for decades to come. I thank you for your time and look forward to your questions.
Thank you, General Vick. I'm quite certain you're doing everything you can. I'd like to hear from Ms. Maurer about what is not being done.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and Ranking Member Waltz, other members and staff. It's a pleasure to be back before the committee this afternoon to talk about GAO's work on F-35 sustainment. Since last year's hearing, we visited F-35 bases, and we've talked to pilots and maintainers and commanders, and we've heard that when it's flying, the F-35 is an impressive aircraft with cutting-edge capabilities. We're also encouraged that the Joint Program Office, OSD, the services, and the prime contractors have increasingly focused on sustainment, and that focus has yielded some improvements. Alice servers are smaller and easier to deploy. The global supply chain is more responsive to user needs, and repair times for engine modules have improved significantly. However, the program's own measures show how much additional progress is needed. F-35 sustainment is getting better, but it is far from good. The F-35 still is not flying as often as the services would like. Mission capable rates have declined over the last year, and full mission capable rates are far below service goals. The program is still not meeting more than half of its reliability and maintainability goals. That means all too often, the aircraft requires repair sooner and takes longer to fix than expected. The F-35 also remains very expensive to operate and support, and the Air Force in particular faces substantial gaps between what it costs to fly the plane and what they can afford to pay. In other words, F-35 sustainment currently costs too much and does not deliver enough. And that's not a reassuring bottom line for a $1.7 trillion investment in something that's so vital to our nation's security. To improve that outlook, the program needs to address several interlinked sustainment challenges and uncertainties. Many of them stem from too many years of thinking about sustainment as something that comes, like something that can be addressed later. Well, it's no longer later. With over 450 F-35s in service in the U.S., now is the time to get sustainment right. And as General Fick and Mr. Maroney just made clear, they understand this, and they are grappling with several key issues to get this done. For example, DoD is reconsidering the division of sustainment responsibilities and control between contractors and the government. And striking the balance on access to technical data is a centerpiece of that issue. And those decisions are inevitably linked with whether, how, or when to pursue a performance-based logistics approach to sustainment. The program also needs to decide whether to upgrade the existing engine on the aircraft or develop new ones. Either path is going to have substantial implications for sustainment, both for the services and our international partners. DoD also needs to plan and execute moving sustainment responsibilities from the Joint Program Office to the services. This represents a major change, and developing a clear path and consensus for this handoff is vital. Now, our independent oversight at the GAO will continue to help in these efforts. Since 2014, we've recommended DoD develop or revise strategies for technical data, global supply chain, ALICE, affordability, and now engines. 34 recommendations in all. To its credit, DoD has generally agreed and taken some action on most, but 21 of 34 still remain open. So the question was asked earlier, what should DoD do to fix F-35 sustainment? Well, first, I'll wave my GAO flag and say, fully implement GAO's recommendations. But second, maintain the focus on sustainment. Fielding new aircraft with new technology is important, but they won't contribute much if they're not sustained. Third, build on the progress we've seen in specific aspects of the program. These tactical successes should become a springboard to address the many strategic challenges we've highlighted in our reports. And finally, ensure that F-35 decisions support broader departmental sustainment needs. Now, this won't be easy, it won't happen overnight, but taking these steps will help DoD fly the F-35 as intended, sustain it as planned, and be able to afford to do so. Thank you for the opportunity to testify this afternoon. I look forward to questions.
I'm going to take a deep breath. I'm going to be as polite as possible. However, Mr. Morani, you and I had a clear conversation yesterday. Mr. Fick, we've had conversations over and over. I will not tolerate any longer what has been, we're going to get on with it. We're going to do it. It hasn't been done. I've been watching the F-35 for a decade, and it has not been solved. It has not been at the attention necessary to sustain this $1.7 trillion platform has not occurred. Plain and simple. We're going to go off and buy new, bright, shiny airplanes. They're going to be flying probably well for a few months, and then they're going to wind up with a problem. They're going to go to a depot that's not prepared for them. They're going to have to go, maybe the engine is not working, which is a Pratt & Whitney problem. They're going to be before this committee soon. And if they're in the audience and if they're listening, watch out. I'm coming at you in a very angry mood. You give us an engine, and it doesn't work. Oh, it worked for a little while until it gets some dust around, and then it doesn't work. What the hell? What's going on here? General, you and your predecessors have promised a solution to ALICE. The entire thing is based upon ALICE, and ALICE doesn't work. Does not work. And can ALICE be compromised? You want to go into classified hearing? I'd love to hear your answer to that. Oh, Odin is going to be the solution until it's not. And so Odin becomes a new, updated box. But it's connected back to ALICE. And ALICE doesn't work. What's going on here? We got a contractor out there, Lockheed, that would love to build new airplanes, and I've got a lot of my colleagues that get off on buying new planes. This committee is responsible for making sure the planes are able to be flown, and they're not. Are you listening to what the GAO has put forward? 21 of 34. Well, I suppose if you were a big league slugger, you could get by with that kind of a percentage. You cannot get by with that kind of a percentage here. Nor can the military get by with it, nor can our warfighters get by with that kind of a percentage. Cannot be done. The message from me, and I hope from my committee, and I know I'm going to raise hell in the full committee, is we're not going to buy more planes until we figure out how to maintain them. It is a fool's errand. It is a waste of money by the taxpayers. It's a bright, shiny machine until it doesn't work. So, where shall we start? I know if I ask you about the engine, you're going to say that's Pratt & Whitney's problem. No, sir. Mr. Morani, Mr. Flick, Air Force, all of you, it's your problem. And if you're not jumping up and down on Pratt & Whitney about why they gave us an engine that works well until it doesn't work, and that period is very, very short, what's going on here? Some people tell me we're going to go back and revisit what we did a decade ago, and that's have a great war between GE and Pratt & Whitney over whether we're going to have 1 or 2 engines. We made a mistake. We should have had 2, so that probably both of them can fail. For the contractors out there, what in the hell are you doing? Why can't you give us a piece of equipment that actually works? You should never have a contract. And for Lockheed, you want a 5-year maintenance contract and you can't do what you're doing today? Come on. What are we thinking? I can consume a lot of time here. If I have not adequately expressed my frustration, I would assume that my frustration is less than the frustration of the pilots and the maintenance out there, the maintainers out there. We have to give them the tools that they need. And that may be money, it may be direction. In fact, we gave direction in last year's NDAA. We're not going to buy more of these things until they'll be able to be maintained. The primary maintenance responsibility on this is Lockheed. And you, gentlemen. So, where do we go? Alice Oden. General, bring us up to date on Alice Oden and tell me why I shouldn't be concerned. Everything is cool? Is that the case?
Sir, so first let me start by saying I share your frustration. The frustration you feel likely pales in comparison to those who confront it every day as we work to make it better. When I look at Alice and Oden, I think back to 2 years ago when I sat before this committee and talked about a very, very rapid transition, a light switch, if you will, from one to the other. And we were educated over time that was a foolish way to proceed. So I have a new material leader working Alice. He arrived shortly before that hearing, and he's got a very, very solid plan in place.
And if it fails, will he just get another promotion?
No.
Okay, carry on.
So our plan to transition from Alice to Oden contains 4 key elements, and you've seen and heard about the first of those elements, the rollout of the Oden base kit, or OBK, right? 70% smaller, 30% cheaper, significantly faster from a throughput perspective to replace the oldest squadron operation units out in the field and to give them enhanced capability from a processing perspective. Think about it from the context of the computer you had on your desk in the year 2000 versus the computer you have on your desk today. That's the order of magnitude shift that we've just given those folks as we've changed out that equipment. We're also working software updates, right? We have continued to accelerate the delivery of new capabilities on the Alice baseline to the units in the field because that's the baseline that we have today. We changed from a paradigm that had us delivering software on 2-year centers to one that targets 6-month centers, actually targets quarterly centers. In most cases, we've now pushed those back to 6 months because those are easier for the field to digest. We're fielding 2 of those quarterly releases now, and we'll have one final quarterly release that's under development now, and we'll release in 2023. And that will be the last release that we develop the way we're doing it now, as we containerize that software, elevate it into the cloud, and then do the development on the next release from the cloud. It'll still field to the legacy architecture, but this is the beginning of now doing software development for our maintenance data system in the cloud. At the same time we're doing that, we're modernizing the underlying data infrastructure to take us away from that 2000 era infrastructure and into something that's more modern and scalable as the fleet scales in size and complexity. And then finally, we're changing the way we interact with the system, and we're disaggregating the software from the underlying hardware so that we can start to use much less touch labor when it comes to pushing new software to the field and having to interact with the system in that way. So we're calling that infrastructure as code, and the IT guys know far more about that than I do. But those four initiatives, all executed in parallel, are what is moving us closer and closer to Odin. Think of it as the dimmer switch now instead of a binary light switch as we move from one to the other. Increasing capability, increasing cybersecurity, decreasing weight, increasing responsiveness as we add those capabilities into the ecosystem.
Thank you, General. Ms. Maurer, you buying that?
I think there's no doubt that Alice has been getting better. It's certainly better than it was 2 years ago when we had the hearing. From our point of perspective, from our point of view from the GAO, there's still an open recommendation that the program develop clear measures of success. What is good enough? What is good? And that's been one of the challenges that we faced in assessing Alice to Odin over the years, is that we hear about new initiatives, we hear about improvements, and we've seen, frankly, some demonstrable improvements, but it's not clear yet whether that is good enough. We do know that when we go out and we talk to maintainers in the field, they say that there's still a good level of frustration in working with the system. It still requires these Alice expediters to navigate through the system. They will say that it is getting better, but it's not what it needs to be currently.
General, I would appreciate if you would give to this committee a specificity on the 4 projects that you just told us about.
Okay.
Exactly what they are, and exactly what you expect from them, and exactly when you will get it done.
Absolutely.
With that, there is about 1,000 other, well, at least another question. I'm going to turn to my ranking member and let him
Sir,
have a shot at this while I sit here and take a...
I'd be happy to add one more piece if you don't mind, and it's a reflection of the progress that we've made. As we've worked our way through the requirements for the upcoming year, the first, I'll say, daylight that we've started to see is that the Air Force has actually reduced their request for Alice administrators on our annualized sustainment contract by 16 heads in this coming year. That's due to the enhancements made to the system, and it's due to the stand-up of what we call the National Alice Support Center, or the NASC, which is a centralized troubleshooting node to help the field. If you multiply those 16 technicians times the number of years left in the program, it's about a $250 million life cycle cost reduction, and that's just a start. Those are just at a couple of the training and test bases. As we stand up more of those installations and take advantage even more broadly, we'll start to see that compound.
I'm certain that all of us are pleased to see there's some progress along the line. Going forward, this year, from now until 365 days from now, exactly what are your priorities on Alice, and exactly what those will be, what the result of them will be, and exactly how you will get it done. Going to hold you accountable.
Yes, sir.
365 days. I expect to be back here. I got an election between now and then. But if I'm back here and I'm in this job, I want to see what it is you're going to accomplish with regard to Alice Odin in the next 365 days. I'm going to hold you accountable. Okay? Very good. Mr. Waltz.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And just as something I think to think about 365 days from now, when I hope we're both here, is just to have industry at the table, because I know we'll go visit industry, whether it's Pratt or Lockheed or whomever, and we get a very different story. And to get everybody in the same room, which I know the JPO, it's the reason why you stood up, but from our perspective, to get everybody on the record, and we can't get any of this, I think would be really helpful. I just have, even to take a step back. We just had the Air Force posture hearing. We're talking about NGAD. We're already talking about the next generation air dominance fighter, but yet we can't take Joint Strike Fighter, which has roughly been around 20, 25 years, to Milestone C. What lessons would you take, before we dive into GAO and what you're doing now? I mean, just conceptually, did we try to make the Swiss Army knife and make this fighter everything, all things to all services and all partners? Did we not invest and look at sustainment first? Did we not hit that continuum between contractor and government the right way? What assumptions did we make? What should this committee be learning? What should we all be learning from, both industry and government, as we're already talking about the next fighter when we still have such issues with this one?
Sir, I think we've actually already learned a fair number of lessons from F-35. When I think about the origins of the F-35 and the timeline on which it was initially conceived and developed, we were in a far different place from an acquisition workforce perspective. Right, we had just come down off of the Desert Shield, Desert Storm timeframe. We were eliminating thousands, dozens of thousands of acquisition professionals, and no longer had the intellectual capacity to do the kinds of things internally that we had done for so many years before, through the 50s, 60s, and 70s. And we conceived this notion that we called TSPR, Total System Performance Responsibility, and we decided that we were going to give that to the contractor and to say, look, it's over to you. You make this work forever. That was the environment that was in place when the F-35 was born. Several years later, early 2000s, 2003, 4, 5 timeframe, on a couple of other programs, probably including F-35, we realized that's really not where we wanted to be. Right? We were kind of driven there by necessity, but we really didn't want to be there, as we were seeing programs not succeed in delivering the outcomes that we wanted. And so we've begun to dig back out, to take more things back into our own hands organically. Dr. LaPlante, when he was the Air Force Acquisition Executive, talked about owning the technical baseline. We had no people to own the technical baseline in that time, but we're building them today. My daughter is a computer programmer at Kessel Run. Right? She is going to be able to own the technical baseline as she grows up within the Air Force. Our sons and daughters, our brothers and sisters can do that. So we had an organizational construct, an acquisition strategy that I think we decided was fundamentally flawed, and we backed away from it on almost every program, and even F-35. And so we're still digging out of that, right? That's one thing I don't think we'll ever do again. I do think that this program was extraordinarily complex. When you think about the capabilities that we deliver to the field today, for the threats against which it was designed, its capabilities are unparalleled. It is the best in the field, right? Because it was reaching, right? It was not something that had been done before. Sensor fusion, stealth, interoperability, those characteristics are unique to the F-35 and to some extent the F-22. No one else in the world was doing that. And so being on the bleeding edge of technology is very expensive. And so the complexity and the technological leaps required to bring this airplane to life were very, very challenging. We've adjusted to that. We've addressed that. We've learned from that when we look at how we're doing the B-21 and how we're looking at NGAD, how we're looking at open systems, right? How we're looking at competition and how we're incorporating those things into the very basic acquisition strategy for those programs moving forward. So I think we've learned those lessons. We've taken them to heart. And as we look at other successes in the Air Force, whether you want to call it within the department, whether you want to call it B-21, whether you want to look at T-7, you look at other programs that are now taking those things that we learned through blood, sweat, and tears. I think they're doing good things for us.
I appreciate that, and I know this is a longer conversation, Mr. Chairman, but the jury's still out in terms of B-21 sustainment, right? Sure. I mean, that's I think Ms. Maurer described it accurately. It's a fantastic platform when it works.
Yeah.
But that leads me to my next question. I mean, what's the service's goals for FMC? I know when I came up in the Army, if you were below 90%, you were fired, you were relieved. But yet I think the goal now is even less than that, and then where are we sitting? We're sitting in the 60s for the A variant?
So for FMC, no, the numbers are below that. If I can pull up my chart here real quick to look. Our threshold for FMC for the F-35A in FY21 is 48%.
Is that acceptable? I mean, do you find that acceptable?
On one hand, I would say no, absolutely not. On the other hand, this aircraft, even in PMC mode, this air system, even in a partial mission-capable mode, delivers capabilities that other aircraft simply cannot do. I'll use an example. I had a weapons school instructor come when I was the deputy PE.
No, I hear you. I mean, just for the sake of time, but that's not what the taxpayer bought, right? And that's not what they were promised through this committee. So what I'm, and I'd appreciate a follow-on briefing. I don't want to dominate the time in terms of how we get from 48% to where the.
So I can help you with that. My perspective on it is this. My dad used to say, when you're up to your neck in alligators, sometimes it's easy to forget you're there to drain the swamp.
Yeah.
We have to do both things. We have to kill the alligators and drain the swamp, which means that we have near-term degraders that we're working on against mission-capable rates and against full mission-capable rates.
I've got that. And just last question. My understanding is most platforms, F-18, F-22, you can go down the list, in terms of engine sustainability, you're sitting at an acceptable about 1% to 2%. But what's built in here is 6%.
Yeah.
6x, 3x or 6x, depending on how you want to look at it. 6 times the rest of the platforms. And I'm just looking at what the standards are, what the reality is, and then how do we help you get there? So I mean, are you satisfied with 6% of the engines?
So candidly, no, I'm not. We're actively,
why is that the goal?
We're actively working with the services to determine what that right number is, or if that's the right strategy. We're assessing whether the strategy that relies upon a 6% NMC rate as a target is acceptable or not. And if you multiply that by the number of aircraft we'll eventually have, that's a huge number. So intuitively, you say that doesn't make sense. If I wind the clock back 2 years, though, right, while we had that 6% objective, right, we were hovering around 1% or better. It wasn't until our power module crisis hit that we really started to dig at something that was more than about 1% or 2%. I remember looking at our early metric slides going, why are we even tracking that? It's so low. But ultimately, it ballooned. We figured out that the strategy that we have in place really works well at steady state. And it assumes that the spares are at the appropriate level. It assumes that our depot capacity is at the appropriate level and the appropriate velocity. And it assumes that we consume them at some set level, right? Only when all those things work does it all come together appropriately. And up until 2020, we were doing that. When the crisis hit, though, that's when the numbers went down.
Mr. Marney, when would we get what's the plan to address the GAO's recommendations? Why are we still sitting at 21 to 34?
Ranking Member Waltz, thank you for the question. So, so we recognize we're late with that plan. We should have submitted a interim. That plan is in work with our staff. I will say that we have regular engagements, even though we're late with the plan and the results. We do meet with GAO on a weekly basis to talk about this platform and other sustainment challenges. So it's not as if we're not addressing their concerns, sharing what we're doing, and working together to get to yes on these recommendations. We feel we probably need another 60 to 90 days to get it through coordination. It's about 80% right now, and I'll let.
To be clear, just for everybody, baseline, this is just a plan to address the recommendations, not to actually implement the recommendations, correct?
No.
So this response more accurately reflects the current status of our actions against each of those recommendations. Okay. I anticipate that when you see the final product here in 90 days or so, it's going to recommend that a fair number of those recommendations actually close.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. We'll now turn to Ms. Spear.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. Thank you all for being here. You know, this reminds me on a much larger scale of the debacle with the LCS. We are incapable of turning off the spigot when something doesn't work. So this is a $400 billion program to build them and a $1 trillion program to sustain it over the life cycle. And we're asking the American people to pay for F-35s, only 55% of which are considered mission capable, when the standard is supposed to be 75%, that only about 30 to 35% of the F-35s are fully mission capable compared to a target of 60%, and maintenance is taking twice as long as originally intended, and there's a shortage of replacement parts. And on top of all of that, we created a sustainment contract, much like we did with Alice, where we're not in charge. And Lockheed Martin has the maintenance contract. So it's a cash cow for them for the future. And since we have a record that the sustainment costs are double, and a record that we can't keep those planes in air, how can we look the taxpayers in the face and say, well, that's just the way it is, and shrug our shoulders? So my first question is, when are we going to take over maintenance?
So, ma'am, that's a multifaceted question. As I'm sure you know, ultimately, we have begun to do it already. Right? We've stood up 39 of the 68 organic depots, depot workloads that are basically bringing all of that product support provider work into the organic sphere. And we're going to continue to stand up those depots now until about 2028. There's actually 31 additional activations in work to include 13 more in this calendar year. So that is the organic depot work. We have taken from Lockheed the domestic warehousing function and assigned that to the Defense Logistics Agency. We've taken the CONUS transportation network from Lockheed Martin and assigned that to U.S. Transcom. We've taken the disposition of, or the demilitarization of old parts and also assigned that to DLA. We are very gradually and deliberately, in ways that are intended to not adversely influence the warfighter, affecting that transformation even as we speak. My team is working very, very close with Mr. Marani's team to also explore Pathfinder initiatives that allow us to work directly with the sub-suppliers to stand up the more organic maintenance of that supply chain. And then furthermore, as we look at the 21 to 23 annualized sustainment contract that we mentioned, what that contract does is it ratchets up the requirements and aligns Lockheed's incentive fee to the achievement of those milestones from both a full mission capable perspective as well as different supply support metrics, what we call gross issue effectiveness and customer wait time. All of those things intended to hold them accountable to deliver the effects that we desire.
So according to the GAO, the unscheduled maintenance is the highest sustainment risk for the F-35. And if it's not fixed, 43% of the F-35 fleet could be grounded in 2030 for lack of engines. What are we doing about that?
So, ma'am, that goes back to the engine recovery conversation we had a few moments ago. When we discovered this accelerated wear on the hot section of the F-135 power module, we put into effect a three-pronged initiative aimed at increasing the production of power modules at Tinker's Heavy Maintenance Center, aimed at increasing the global production via both our OEM suppliers as well as some of our OCONUS depots for MRO and U of the F-135 engine. And we also did accelerated engine testing to examine the limits that we had put upon the damage in the engine so that we can update them based upon actuals from the field and not engineering estimates. The combined effect of those three initiatives altogether brought our recovery from the power module crisis back from sometime in the 2030s to 2026. So we have very, very deliberately worked to back, on a multi-phased approach, to back that crisis and turn it into something we can manage and not something that's going to ground 48% of the fleet. Now, a lot of those numbers weren't in place by the time Ms. Maurer wrote her report because we have been moving that fast to make a difference across those 3 different lines of effort. So it's not surprising to me that the report says what it does. But when she comes back and we have the conversation this year, she's going to see the results that we've been able to accomplish together.
My time's expired, Mr. Chairman, but if there's a second round, I would like to have Ms. Moore actually respond to those comments.
I would like to have you have that right now, but the normal processes here don't allow me to do that. We now turn to Ms. McLean.
I'm learning the rules, so thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you all for being here. As you know, an essential responsibility of this subcommittee is to ensure that the appropriate resources are being authorized to meet mission readiness requirements. Yet, unfortunately, we consistently lack the level of detail in the annual budget request to conduct this critical oversight work. The first question we must answer, and we really must answer this question, is what are DoD's mission readiness requirements in support of the National Defense Strategy? To that end, Congress required in fiscal year 2021 in the NDAA for all the services to submit readiness metrics for every major weapon system within the President's budget request starting this year. Secretary Marani, the Department of Defense has yet to submit these materials, unless I'm missing something and I've missed it, which could possibly happen. When can we expect the department to comply with this requirement? Because it kind of seems to be a pattern of lack of requirement.
So ma'am, I'm going to take that one for the record so that I give you the right response. I believe that the first reporting period was last year for that. I believe we did submit that. In conjunction with other
Well,
NDA.
I'll take it for the record, and because I had had an opportunity to question General Milley and Secretary Austin, and they said they would get me that information, and I still have yet to receive it. So, seems like pretty important information that we should have before we spend the taxpayers' dollars. Second question is, why was the budget even submitted without this information? If that's a requirement, why was it even submitted?
So, ma'am, you're asking me questions that in my capacity, that I don't have the authority to determine whether it should be submitted or not. So I will take that for record and get you an answer from the appropriate office.
Do you think we should have criteria before we spend taxpayer dollars? And do you think we should adhere to that criteria? Do you think that's important?
I do.
Thank you. General Fisk, another question we need answered is, what is our return on investment for the F-35 program in terms of readiness? In other words, for example, when you put $1 into that program, are we getting, in your opinion, adequate return on that dollar of investment in terms of readiness?
So, ma'am, that's an outstanding question. I'm not entirely sure how to answer it, but what I can relate it to is one of the things that we do to improve readiness is we put reliability and maintainability improvement program initiatives into the hopper. This program was very, very slow to get started on RMIP. From 2015 through 2019, I think we invested a total of about $10 million, maybe $20 million. In 2020 and 21, the total is about $100 million. And as we look at what that $120 million has done or is expected to do, we're expecting that to net about a $5.5 billion return
When?
over the life cycle of the program.
So at roughly 50% capacity and readiness, that's a good return on investment, is what you're saying? You're
ma'am.
pleased with the return on that investment?
No, ma'am. These are things that we are doing, identifying systems within the aircraft that need to be fixed to allow us.
So we're not really pleased with the return on that investment. Let me move on. If this committee requires you to provide that information with the objectives and metrics required within the budget, can I get your commitment to actually deliver them?
Ma'am, you have my commitment.
Thank you, sir. How would this readiness and sustainment information improve the GAO's ability to audit and assess the F-35 program?
Yeah, thank you for the question. We're always happy to have additional information, additional facts to enhance
Would
our
it help
ability.
you?
It would be helpful, yes.
I have 12 seconds left, so with that, I'll yield back, sir.
If we have time for another round, I'll add 12 seconds.
Thank you, sir.
Very good. I will now turn to Mr. Courtney.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Maurer, in the last NDAA, there was actually some movement in terms of sustainment issues. There were 4 different provisions that were included in the bill. One involved the Comptroller General, so that obviously they're not here to update us. But there were, I mean, first of all, what's your general take on the changes or the amendments that were passed last year in terms of just where GAO is with your recommendations?
Sure, absolutely. And let me just state that I work for the Comptroller General, so
whoops,
I can certainly speak to that requirement. It's a reporting requirement. We have ongoing work right now looking at status of maintenance, both field level and depot level maintenance for the F-35. In terms of the other requirements, we're always pleased to see Congress playing an active role in providing oversight of this program, both because it involves so much money, but also because it's so vital to national security. We're not going to take a position on whether the specific changes were good or bad, because we serve the Congress as a whole, but it is good to see Congress wading in directly on issues of sustainment concern. Engines, trying to find a better balance between contractor and government-led work, for example.
So again, we're not that far away from markup for 2023. If you had, again, in terms of based on the GAO recommendations, and what would be your recommendation today in terms of what you would like to see us do?
Well, I think first and foremost, continue to have hearings like this, because I think that the visibility is important, the oversight and attention is important. In terms of areas of emphasis, continue to focus on sustainment. I think the Congress is asking the right questions about decision-making around purchasing additional number of aircraft. I'm being very careful here that we do not have a position at GA on what those numbers should be, but having good, robust conversations around striking that balance, right, between new capabilities and the ability to sustain those capabilities is very important.
So, I mean, there was in one of the sections, some incentives or handcuffs that actually tied the number of aircraft to, the affordability issue. So, I mean, I think there really was an attempt to try and use the law, to really stimulate change.
And exactly, I think that was in alignment with one of the matters we had for Congress in a report last year on F-35 affordability. We asked Congress to consider making that direct linkage, seeing progress on affordability or lack thereof, and using that to drive decision-making on future purposes. And Congress did exactly that.
Right, thank you. So, General, in your opening remarks, you talked about, again, the effort to sort of shift the balance between contractor and government. You described, again, some of the, concrete actions that have taken place.
Yes, sir.
I think I heard you say that there was some funding limitations in terms of the, that process of trying to either acquire the data or take, ownership of the data. I'm not sure. Did I hear you right? And
yes, sir,
sort
you
of
did.
Tease that out a little.
Sure. So as we have talked about with the U.S. services about their role in F-35 sustainment, they have expressed an interest and a desire and an intention to more organically manage the sustainment supply chain. Associated with that activity, we need to be able to deliver to them the provisioning and cataloging data associated with the parts within that ecosystem. Right? We have the rights to that data. It's not a matter of data rights. It's a matter of data delivery, right? And being able to have that data delivered is going to cost money, and that money is going to be somewhere in the neighborhood of about $500 million. divided amongst the services, to help enable that activity to stand up.
So, Ms.
Because we
Mauer-
haven't been able to make that happen, that's why we've started exploring these pathfinders as ways to have that data delivered as a matter of course at low to no cost. And so we're trying to find ways to keep moving
Got it.
despite.
So, based on what the general just said, Ms. Mauer, if we were able to find that $500 million, would that be an investment that would show a good rate of return for the taxpayer?
I think there's the potential for it doing that. You know, one of the things that we hear a lot when we are talking to maintainers in the field is and we're talking about service members on the flight line, their frustration with the limitations and being able to repair the aircraft. And it comes down to very specific things like, is this particular part of the F-35, is it broken enough for us to take it off the plane? If it needs to come off the aircraft, what tool do we use? How do we replace it? What tool do we use to put it back on? Those are the kind of specific levels of the information that's part of technical data sort of writ large, and that's one of the challenges that that they face.
And if I heard you correctly, General, again, you sort of saw this as something that could be spread out amongst the Navy and the Air Force in terms of the service budgets?
Sir, I believe that's the intent. Is that they're both departments or participants within that ecosystem. I know the Air Force probably has voiced the most overtly their desire to do this work, but I think the Navy is on board as well. Steve, I don't know if you can help.
No, I would confirm that. And I would want to go back to what General Fick said about other options to get that data and to work directly with some of the sub-tier suppliers. We have arrangements in place with many of these vendors today where we can leverage those contracts and become that provider. Our FRCs, our NAVSUP, ICP, the Air Force's 448 Supply Chain Wing, they all have those professionals that do that kind of work and have those arrangements. So we can leverage those contracts and through that scale. And again, we don't want to pay for it twice. We want to move it into the organic supply chain management role because we do that work, and we're responsible to you to do that work as well. So if we can do that without paying for the data, that's the path we want to go.
I believe we're going to have time for a second round amongst the three of us that remain here. And we'll go until we have to go to votes, which is unknown, but will happen. So I'm going to get to start this second round. Several issues have been illuminated by the questions and the answers. This committee needs to have a serious conversation with Pratt Whitney about the engine. In the meantime, I won't go into it now, but to note that that is a problem. We discussed earlier planes with holes in them, in other words, no engines. General, you mentioned something. I don't want to ask a question about it, but there are limits on performance of the aircraft because the engine may not work at a super high performance level. Is that correct? No?
No.
I'm pleased to learn that. You shook your head. Yes, no?
Sir, I don't know what you're referring to. I apologize.
Well, this is supposed to be the super plane.
Yes.
There appear to be limits on what it can do because the engine may not be able to perform.
Chairman, I believe, this current engine can meet the current specifications for the aircraft and for the TR-3 Block 4. If that's what you mean, the performance specifications, it's sized to be able
If
to
you're going
deliver.
to tell me I'm wrong, this is a good one to tell me I'm wrong about, and I thank you for that. But we do need to get into this engine issue in great detail. And I know that we're going to be faced with the issue of two engines. General Electric is going to make a full attack on the committee to come back. Yeah, Joe, you can laugh, but that's what's going to happen. And they're going to want us to authorize two engines. So we're going to have to deal with that. I also know that in the President's budget, there's depot money that is going to slide forward. We'd like to say to the right. And I'm going to have a problem with that. The issue of the depots being fully capable of taking up their tasks remains a major concern for this committee and for the chairman. So we're going to look carefully at that. If there's a question about whether there is adequate money for the depots to be fully prepared to take on their tasks, tell me that I don't have to worry about it. General?
So, sir, what I think you're referring to is we've had conversations, and I can't go into the details of our ongoing production contract negotiations, but historically, the department has taken some risk at what we call the below-the-line or support costs associated with things like depot stand-up, and have counted on us to yield savings in those negotiations that can then be used to shore up those funds. The headwinds we're facing due to COVID, amongst other things, are limiting our ability to do that, we believe, in this year, and that's what we're struggling to work with both SAEs and the DAE to chart a path forward.
Is that a nice way of saying that you intend to pull money out of the current money for updating all of the depots? Tell me that's not what you said.
Sir, it's that's not exactly what I said. What I said was historically the department has underfunded that line within the budget, and they've relied upon us to negotiate savings in our contracts that we can then apply to that delta so that they're fully funded. We're going to have trouble doing that this year, I believe. So the department does not want to not fund the depots, and so they've tasked us to come back to them and figure out what are the COAs, whether it be through internal funding from other sources or ATRs, what would be required to make sure that we keep that depot infrastructure whole. That's the task that we've been given.
I'm reading you to say that the money necessary to prepare the depots to carry out their tasks is at risk, and that the risk is you have to find the money to do what the department is unwilling to directly fund. Correct?
Yes, sir.
The problem of the F-35 is a shared problem. It's a problem of the contractor, Lockheed Martin and others. It is a problem of the Department of Defense not paying attention to sustainment, and it is a problem of this committee and the Senate wanting to buy new, bright, shiny things and not pay much attention to the sustainment of what has been purchased. I've seen it here over and over again. Every year, it is this committee, together with the appropriators and the Senate, that buy new equipment and shortchange the sustainment money necessary. I am not going to go through this next. If anybody out there listening, any of my colleagues are listening, I'm going to raise holy hell about what we have failed to do, and that is our share of this responsibility. I see Mr. Moore. I welcome you back. I'm going to cut off my own comments here and go to you. Thank you for rejoining us, Mr. Moore.
Thank you, Chairman Garamendi. Appreciate you highlighting the F-35. I express my commitment to it as well. Utah's first district, heavily committed to the F-35 and making sure we find the solutions. No weapon system is perfectly rolled out. We understand that, and we do. I appreciate how you've mentioned the various stakeholders that are involved and the roles that we all play. And I remain committed in this role to make sure we see this through. The perspective that I would say matters the most is from those that fly and maintain the plane. And at Hill Air Force Base, our F-35 pilots have made it very clear in multiple conversations, visits I've had with them, that when this plane is operational, it simply cannot be beat. The Ogden Air Logistics Complex, where all F-35A depot maintenance is performed, our maintainers are proud to work on the Joint Strike Fighter, the most capable and lethal fighter ever in operation. While a program of this scale is not without challenges, as we've discussed, when our pilots are flying into war, they want to be in an F-35. And I believe two things can be true at once. We can exercise aggressive oversight to improve sustainment while also not permitting these challenges to disrupt our commitment to the present and future American air superiority. Ms. Maurer, when it comes to sustainment cost tied to the program, what do you see as the breakdown of cost tied to who owns the cost among the U.S. government, Lockheed, and Pratt & Whitney? Like, what do you see as the breakdown of that? And then, recommendations to provide full transparency and ownership costs to develop a plan to drive sustainment costs across the enterprise. Appreciate your context.
Great, thank you very much for the question. Well, broadly speaking, the cost of F-35 sustainment ultimately all goes back to the U.S. taxpayer and to DoD. So DoD is responsible for the oversight. In terms of execution, the vast majority of sustainment responsibilities falls on Lockheed as a primary contractor for the airframe and Pratt & Whitney as a primary contractor for the engine. So in terms of the breakout of the cost and responsibility, I think that's pretty much how the way it does play out. And the issue that you raise about the sort of the disconnect between the way pilots view the aircraft and the sustainment outcomes is something that we saw when our team visited Hill Air Force Base 2 months ago. And one of the most striking things we heard from folks on the ground there was that the essential message was that they had just completed a successful deployment of F-35s to Europe at a time of great national need, and they showed great resilience and they showed great creativity in doing that. But what we heard from them was they did that despite the way the program is currently set up from a sustainment perspective. And I think that's a good informal measure of ultimately reaching success, that they're able to make those deployments successfully because of the way the program is structured for sustainment, and we're not there yet.
Thank you. Appreciate the context. General Fick, pilots have deployed downrange have expressed concerns over the DoD's reliance on contractors and the lack of proprietary flexibility. Could you please describe the department's efforts to acquire the necessary technical data to transition to more organic sustainment, and what barriers might prevent this effort from succeeding?
Certainly. So we're working today. We just had a conversation a few moments ago before you came online about how we are working to procure the technical data that will allow us to take a greater role in the management of the F-35 supply chain. And so that is one way in which the department is looking to take a more significant role. Today, the product support integrator, the hybrid product support integrator for the F-35, it is an Air Force officer whose name is Shane Henderson. He's stationed at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, and he runs the HPSI Ops Center there. He is in the middle, they are in the middle, we are in the middle of all of those sustainment decisions from an F-35 perspective today. And we're going to continue to mature the HPSI construct, the Ops Center construct there at Wright-Pat as we work our way into the future.
Thank you, General. Chairman, I appreciate your adjustments and letting me ask my questions. I will yield back, but just end with a firm commitment to being a part of the problem-solving aspect of this. And I appreciate people's honesty and context to helping us get there and being a reasonable and productive stakeholder here. So thank you all.
Thank you, Mr. Moore. I will note that from time to time you've brought to my attention the depot problems at Hill. I'll just add that.
From time to time, or every day.
We have votes underway. The reality is there's probably 15, maybe 20 minutes before we're going to have to run. I'm going to do, Mr. Clay has returned. We're going to do lightning round here. Mr. Clay, your late arrival limits your time to about 2 minutes. So one question, and then we'll come back through from here. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Chair. I'll be quick then, and I guess I'll just jump right into General Fick. Can you give us an update at all on supply issues with the fan modules and the power modules from Pratt in regards to the F-35?
So I'm tracking very, very closely the power module issue at broadly within the enterprise. What I can tell you is that right now at the fleet level, we have about a 5% not mission capable rate associated with power modules. We're down from a much, much larger number over the course of the summer, but the three-pronged effort we put in place to increase throughput at Tinker, increase global throughput, and keep engines on wing longer by expanding operating limits have really helped us to recover from that crisis much, much faster than normal. Fan modules is popping onto my radar as well. I'm tracking Tinker as my primary repair source for the fan modules, but I don't have much more of an update on the fans than that.
Part of it, sir, is what I've been hearing is coming out of Nellis and you know, the high ops tempo with the F-35 there with red flag and issues that they're having with fan modules, power modules, the FAD code, you know, real specific things that the maintenance maintainers are having in regards to the F-35.
Right. Certainly the FAD codes assigned to units are associated with the activity that they undertake. And we as an enterprise establish those FAD codes to prioritize units in combat or directly supporting combat, knowing that sometimes that meant the test or training units that were back home suffered a little bit longer waits for parts that were limited in their supply. Obviously, the solution to this problem, I don't think, is to change the FAD code system, but to fix the supply problem so that we have fewer parts that are actually in that limited mode.
I guess it's fair to say then that deployable units always get higher priorities than other units.
And you see that reflected in the MC and FMC numbers even today. Those units that deploy forward and frequently operate at MC and FMC rates in the high 80s and even in the 90s.
Right. Mahalo, Mr. Chair. I think that was my 2 minutes. 2 minutes? I'll take the other 2 minutes, but no, I'll yield, Mr. Chairman, and if I have another opportunity, I'll ask another question.
What's the vote situation? 350 remaining. You got another minute.
All right, let's go. All right. Question then for Lieutenant General Fick again. In terms of, are there trade-offs involving upgrading fourth gen versus retrofitting F-35s with increased Block 4 capability? Are there any attempts to analyze the cost and capability of those impacts?
So ultimately, I think that's a better question for the Air Force than it is for the JPO. But when you think about it, the F-35s that came off the line at the end of the system development design phase, the SDD phase, were designed against the Eastern European threat that we knew about back in 2000. The Block 4 capability suite was really designed to go after the emerging and evolving threat from China and the more advanced systems from Russia. So depending upon what you need to do with the aircraft and where you intend to employ it, is it a training jet or is it one that you're going to take downtown, that would help to determine whether or not you need the full capabilities of Block 4 or whether you can stay in a legacy TR2 or configuration.
Okay. Mahalo, Mr. Chairman.
That question needs to be fully understood by us. There's really a differential here between what will be the training and then the actual downtown useful work.
Yep.
So we want to keep that in mind because there is a differential. Mr. Moore, excuse me, Mr. Waltz.
If I could just get a quick update, I believe you mentioned it, General, on the Navy's Fleet Readiness Center in Southeast, or Navy's Fleet Readiness Center Southeast in Jacksonville. And then a broader question on, I mean, if there was one thing this committee could do in this next NDAA to get those FMC rates where they need to be, what would that be? And if you want to take that for the record, and Ms. Maurer, I'd throw that one at you as well.
Thank you, Mr. Are we doing lightning round, Mr. Chairman? All right.
So, sir, I'd be happy to chew on that one and get back to you with a more a complete answer. From an FRC Southeast perspective in JAX, they're going to be standing up to go initial depot capability for F-135 power modules in 2024, towards the end of 2024. And then I believe there's a MILCON request pending that will allow them to ramp production from 24 to 120, and that comes in, I think, the 25 timeframe.
Very, very good, important
You want me
point.
to do 15 seconds on that? Right, so I think if you want to get after FMC rates, I would imagine R&M metrics, reliability, maintainability metrics, so make sure that the parts that you are putting onto the aircraft and maintaining the aircraft with are reliable, and then when it comes time to fix it, you can do it within the allotted time, would help with FMC rates, but a lot else goes into that, into achieving high FMC rates.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
There's a lot more detail in that very quick answer. that we really need to understand how to get to what you just described. Ms. Spear.
One clarification. We're spending $400 billion on these planes. Lockheed Martin is obviously receiving a profit from that. And then the technical data that we need to be able to maintain it, we can't get from them. We can only leverage it through some subcontractors. Is that what I understand it?
So, ma'am, in most cases, the technical data that we're looking for is actually data that comes from those vendors. It's not Lockheed's IP, it's the vendor's IP.
All right. Ms. Mara, there's been a lot said about the questions that I asked, and I wanted you to be able to respond.
So real quickly, on the engines piece, in our most recent report and some of the summary of that information is contained in my statement for the record today, we point to 3 different baselines that have been developed by the Joint Program Office for getting to a better position on engines. The original baseline, which was the one that you cited, showed about 43% of the aircraft sitting on the tarmac, and that was based on where the program was about a year or so ago. They have gotten they've seen some improvements. It looks like the out year is not going to reach that dire of a situation. That's sort of reflected in our numbers. We are waiting to see the full execution of what they want to do, but we have seen some improvements. So some of the things that General Fick and Mr. Maroney were talking about, we've seen some improvements. So the engines are staying on the wings longer, they are repairing them faster at the depot, and they've made other improvements in the process as well. So it's not going to be as bad as 43%, but I can't predict from a GAO angle how much better it's going to be down the road.
And ma'am, we're happy to share those projections with you as well.
Can I ask one last question? I know, General, you're leaving, probably gleefully, from this position. Is that correct?
Ma'am, the Department of Defense has not made any public announcement relative to...
You said something that gave me the impression that you were... Normally, there's a period of time that you serve and then move on to something else, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
So my question is, and to anyone who might... Because this is so important, because this is so expensive, does it not make sense to have someone in your role for a longer period of time to be able to get a handle on the long-term ramifications and fixes?
Yes, ma'am. Ultimately, the Joint Program Office charter was updated back in 2015 to remove what used to be seen kind of as term limits relative to a PEO's tenure, a Program Executive Officer's tenure. You may remember General Chris Bogdan. He was the PEO for 5 years prior to Admiral Matt Winter, who was my predecessor. If I add my deputy PEO time and my PEO time together, I come up with 5 years, so that seems like a long time to me. But I certainly appreciate that you don't want a revolving door for someone just to walk in and then back out and not have to eat their own dog food, so to speak, relative to making progress with plans that they put in place.
Thank you. I yield back.
I have not had an opportunity to talk to the professional staff on my own team as well as on the minority team. However, I would like to schedule briefings, not formal hearings because we don't have a space for that, but briefings, informal, but I think very informative, to go after these issues in greater depth. We're going to write an NDAA, and we absolutely have to get it right and move this thing along. With both authorities as well as responsibilities. We haven't had time to talk about a joint simulation environment. We could. We haven't talked about a lot of things here. So be prepared. We will go. I would like very much, if we can schedule it, to go back with briefings rather than a formal hearing. Melanie, get ready for that. With all of you, thank you so very much for the testimony today. We've made progress. This whole system has made progress, insufficient, but nonetheless progress. I thank you for that effort. This meeting is adjourned.